Thanks for listening to Draw Near with Fred and Kara, or normally with Fred and Kara, but today it's just going to be me, and I have a very wonderful guest with me today. I'm sure a lot of people actually have heard of her. She's a speaker, musician with her husband oftentimes, and a wife and a mother, so we're continuing this series on motherhood and family life. So I'd like to welcome Noelle Garcia to our episode today. Thanks for joining, Noelle.
Thanks for having me. It's good to be here.
Yeah. So Noelle and I actually met probably like 5 years ago, was it?
It was a while ago. Yeah.
Yeah. We had Noelle come to a youth conference that we were running, and she was so wonderful. It was our youth conference, and she was one of our keynotes, and so we were very lucky to have her. But I will say, like, after we met, I started following you on Facebook, and one of my favorite things is, like, whenever you post random stories about your kids or, like, conversations that they have with you or each other, it's the funniest thing.
They are hilarious. Half the stuff, though, I can't post on Facebook. Like, it's not Facebook appropriate. It was funny because we had met somebody who was like, we would love to do a Catholic reality family TV show on your kids. They're so funny. And I was like, no, thank you. That would be a disaster.
It's like, you don't know the half of it.
I don't want to be the Catholic Kardashians or something like that. No, thank you.
Oh, that's hilarious. I know. I feel like some of the things, like, half the time, just BJ and I find it funny. BJ's my husband. Like the other day we were in the car and Clara goes, Mom, I wish we had basketball at home. And I was like, yeah, maybe we should get a hoop. And she goes, yeah, and some hoop-to-balls. I'm like, you mean basketballs? Yeah. Awesome. I thought it was so funny.
That's awesome.
But I mean, I don't know if anybody else ever finds those things funny, but I love when you post it. What made you want to do that? I feel like it's almost like people can go back. It's like modern day reviewing of Saint Diaries. Like, you can go back and look at, like, oh, this is what was going on in their life.
This is all cause for why we will not be saints. They'll be like, oh, I saw what she put on Facebook, you know. But actually, so I've always loved quoting people and the interesting things that they say and their conversations. I've done that ever since I was in high school, probably. So then when my kids would say cute or funny things, I would just write them down. And so then I started to share them on Facebook, and people seemed to like them. And then David was turning them into cartoons for a little while there, but he is
cool.
You can see them on Instagram if you look for Fingers Under the Door. That was the name of our little comic strip. And then
awesome.
He just kind of got busy and stopped doing it. But I have a whole database of quotes for him to turn into cartoons. So he should be relaunching soon.
I feel like I relate so much to that. Fingers under the door. That's like when moms go to the bathroom and they're like, do you see my hand? And they're just like sticking their fingers.
It's either the name of a horror movie or it is the description of motherhood, you know?
Yeah. That's awesome. So your husband's name is David. Would you share a little bit about, like, how you guys met and kind of your relationship?
Sure. So David and I actually met on a Catholic dating website, and he always jokes with people and tells them it's called CatholicChicks.com. So he'll be like, I met my wife on CatholicChicks.com. And we were sharing that story with a group of 8th graders one time, and all the boys come up and they're like, there's no such thing as CatholicChicks.com. And I'm like, David, you
like
better.
They looked it up on their phone?
Yeah, they looked it up on their phone. I thought it was so cute, all these 8th grade boys looking for a Catholic chick. So we met online. I was living in Michigan. He was living in Massachusetts. And I had not just gotten out of a relationship, but I had ended a relationship with somebody that I thought I would marry just because we had been together for so long. But just things weren't really adding up. And I felt the Lord tell me, you know, you can stay in this relationship and I'll be with you, or you can let go and trust me. So I said, okay, I let go. I focused on strengthening my prayer life, and then felt called to sign up for this website. It was Ave Maria Singles at the time. I don't know if it is still around or not, to be honest. But and then my husband, David, he reached out to me, and his email was, I see by your profile that you can't cook, so if it works out between us, we'll probably starve. And that's all he said. And I was like, what a weirdo. What a super weirdo, you know? Like, but when I
Did
looked
you
at his
respond?
profile, yeah, well, okay, so I waited 3 days because I thought, yeah, this guy is super weird. And but we had so much in common based on his profile. He's really into music and youth ministry, and
Yeah.
so I just kept being drawn back to his profile, and I thought, all right, I'll bite, and then it was just back and forth right away, phone calls a week later, and visits a couple months after that. Then he
Yeah.
moved to Michigan to be closer to me, and we were engaged about a year after that, and engaged or married 6 months after that. So,
Oh, that's awesome.
yeah.
Very cool. And you guys have 5 kids?
We have 6 kids,
6 kids.
and we've been married for about a little over 13 years.
Okay, well, that's awesome. I feel like we kind of have a similar story of, like you said, we were considering getting married to your former boyfriend or your previous boyfriend. And like that was kind of a similar situation where like I was with someone for 5 years. And so it was like, oh, considering marriage for the sake of like we've been together for so long. So I know we have some listeners who are in their single, young adult life. What's something that you think is important to look for in a life partner, in a spouse? Because I think that is such a hard thing. Like either you've been single for so long, so you start dating someone and you're like all in only because you've been single for so long, or you've been dating that person so long, and so you're like, well, we're gonna get married.
Yeah, so I had a very bad understanding of love as a decision. It was like, well, love is not a feeling and love is a decision. And I remember telling somebody, I don't understand. I am giving 100% in this relationship. I'm deciding to love this person, but I'm so unhappy. And then it dawned on me, love was the decision that I was making, but that he wasn't really fully making, this other guy.
Yeah.
And so for me, it's like love as a decision has to be in marriage completely mutual. And so if the person you're dating is not 100% and you're giving 100% and even 110%, then that's not good. That's not a good start to a marriage, because it does have to be everybody's all in and all into the journey, not necessarily even like, because there are days where David and I are not 100% into each other, like they never told you in marriage prep that sometimes you don't like each other,
Yeah.
but it's all in 100% to the relationship and the vocation. And if somebody's kind of, not super into that, then I would say they're not going to be willing to sacrifice. They're not going to be willing to give when it's hard. And so the thing that I appreciated most about David is he took initiative and he was all in too. It wasn't just me. It wasn't just one-sided.
I like that you say like they don't tell you that you might not like your spouse some days. In one of our episodes, I think it was actually the other one on wives and motherhood. We were talking, and the other guest, Fred's wife, Crystal, she was like, what's hard about marriage? And I started laughing, and I was like, everything's hard about marriage. And BJ called me. He was on the road, and he's like, I was listening to your episode. He's like, what do you mean everything's hard in marriage? And so I like started telling him, like, of course everything's hard in marriage. So I don't know, like what do you think is like good advice for people in that? Like you don't go in with just like rose-colored glasses to relationships, but like how to get over those humps of like the difficult moments or the moments where you like are fighting or you might not be just madly in love,
Yeah. So the catechism actually has the most beautiful line, and it says, marriage is the vocation in which you learn to love more perfectly. And I feel like, yeah, you see each other at your best and at your worst. But what a treasure it is to love each other anyway, and to work at that love, to really work at like, wow, because when we were first dating, we never fought. And I don't mean like, well, we just were passive aggressive. I mean, we never fought. And I remember thinking, this is so great. We're never going to fight when we're married. But then a few years into it, we're sitting on the front porch and we're talking about divorce, because all the challenges we had, job losses, you had kids in the mix, you had, David has ADHD. I was dealing with some family issues that needed healing, and just all these different things that just kind of start to come up and show their ugly faces when you're going through challenges and handling conflict and disagreeing on how you parent, all of these different things that come
Right.
up. But then, okay, if we are in this, and we actually said to each other, well, divorce is off the table. So now what? You know?
Yeah.
So then he went to counseling, I went to counseling. And I think that's the biggest thing is this is the vocation in which you learn to love more perfectly. And that is hard,
Yeah.
refining anything to make it perfect. Is hard, and it's a journey, and it's work, and it hurts.
Yeah.
It stretches you, but what an amazing thing to then look back on some of those challenges and be like, that was really hard, and we chose to love each other through that.
Mm-hmm. What an image of Christ too. And that's,
Hmm.
what marriage is meant to be, like this image of heaven and the love that we're called to. And I feel like, God loves us unconditionally, and we're so like we are so counter to that. We can't, like, it's hard for us to love unconditionally. We put conditions on it.
Right.
So I feel like that's such a beautiful example of, like, we're called to love exactly what you said in the catechism. We're called to love more perfectly. So we can't ever love perfectly because we're not in heaven, but we're going to grow. And as we kind of encounter more of that love of Christ, I will say, I think one of the like closest feelings I have come to unconditional love is the love of a parent.
Yes.
Like, your kids constantly are just like sometimes irritating, sometimes defiant, but you're always going to choose to love them no matter what.
Right. Right, because they belong to you, and I think
Yeah.
we forget in marriage now, you belong to each other.
Yeah.
It's easier to see that when you are a parent because you gave birth to this child, or you welcomed this child into your home and took on that role of caregiver. But we forget a lot of the times because we're equally yoked with our spouses in terms of probably our ability to argue with each other and like,
Yeah.
but that we belong to each other so closely that we are one. And
One. Mm-hmm.
that yeah, that unconditional love is, I think, a little bit more of a challenge for us in parenthood than, or I mean, in marriage sometimes than parenthood, but it's the same idea.
Yeah. What would you say is the hardest thing about motherhood and the greatest thing about motherhood?
The hardest thing for motherhood for me is to trust the Lord with my children, especially
Yeah.
when they're sick, or when they're, maybe, I don't know, asking questions about things that are like not of the church or whatever, and just hoping that God's going to see them through and keep
Yeah.
them close. Like it would break my heart if they leave the church, it would break my
Yeah.
heart if they get sick with a chronic illness, all of those different things that you know that these children are a gift, and surrendering them back for me is the hardest. Like, it's easier for me to trust the Lord with myself than it is for me to trust
Yes.
him 100% with my children,
Yeah.
who are his children, and he's got a plan for them, I know. So that's the hardest thing. And then I think the best thing is um, just the little random surprises where they just impress you with, I'm taking in everything you're trying to teach me, and I'm practicing it now. For example,
Mm-hmm.
today I was really sad about my mom having complications with a surgery. And my daughter said, Mom, don't worry about anything. I'm going to mop the floors. I'm going to pick up the dishes. You
Oh,
just don't worry about anything. And she's 11. And I'm like, oh, thank you, Jesus.
yeah.
Because usually it's, Mom is so mean and she's making us clean and she thinks we're her slaves and all this stuff. And so then you
Yeah.
think, oh, I'm a failure as a mom. Um,
Yes.
so it's when they surprise you with the good little virtuous people that are there just deep down. That's my favorite
Yeah.
part. Yeah.
Yeah, I love that. The other day, I think all moms can probably relate to those days where you're just like, I'm a terrible mom. I have been yelling at my kids all day. Like, I'm really impatient. That's probably my biggest like struggle with motherhood is I feel like I'm very terrible at the virtue of patience. Just awful. And the other day, it was one where like they weren't listening very well. I felt like I was yelling all the time. And like, I just went to my room and was like, I need just 10 minutes of quiet. And Clara comes in and she like wants to snuggle. And so I was like apologizing to her. I was like, I'm really sorry if today was hard. Sometimes she's super outgoing. So I was like, sometimes when you like to like talk and play and be around people, Mom's the opposite. Like, I just need some quiet and then I get grouchy. And she goes, Mom, I think you need to go to confession. She goes, affession. She's like, I think you need to go to affession. I was like, I think you're probably right.
Yeah, I know. I swore I would never be a yelling mom, but they don't listen, you know?
When they don't listen.
They just don't listen. It must be because they can't hear me. Yeah.
Let me just raise my voice a little.
I know, exactly. But that's what you just said is the perfect thing, is apologizing when we screw up, because then they know they can apologize when they screw up, that we're not perfect, but that we are trying, you know. That's that's an important, just in general, to say, yeah, today was a rough day. I'm sorry that I did these things. Like, for example, what we were praying with our younger kids, and we have a thing with the younger ones where we'll say, you know, just say something that you're thankful for, something you want to pray for, and something you're sorry for. And my 7-year-old said, I'm sorry that I interrupted Mom when she was making the grilled cheese sandwiches this afternoon. And what had happened was, I was in a hurry. I was rushing around. I snapped at him. And the fact that he was carrying that all day really made me sad, you know? Like, I said, buddy, that was not your fault. That was my fault. You were asking me a simple question. I could have answered it and not made a big deal about it. So that was not on you. That's Mommy's. That's what Mommy is sorry for. So, yeah, it was a moment of reconciliation as a parent, and humility, for sure.
Yeah. Yeah, I feel like their little hearts are just like, they just always want to be around you. I kind of had that moment. My son is 2.5 now. And I kind of had that moment when he was first born. Like, you're kind of going through those postpartum emotions. You're trying to figure out nursing, and like all of the noises, or like people hanging on you. I'm going through it right now with my third. It's just like, can you go away? Can you just go away? And I feel like when I was doing that with my son, and I only had Clara, and like she was coming in and she was like trying to climb on me in the rocker and like wanted to be around me, and I got frustrated, and I was like, go to your dad. And then later, after she was asleep, it was kind of like that moment, you know, when you said like he was just coming to ask you a simple question. It was like that. It's like she just wanted to be around someone she knew loved her and someone she trusted. And in that moment, I was like pushing her away as the adult who should know better. And it was really a moment, like you said, it's a moment of humility as a mother, where you're just like, man, they just love me too much. They love me so well.
Just could everybody stop touching me?
Yeah, but that's still true.
5 minutes. Yes. For sure.
Yeah, that's definitely still true. So we're kind of talking a little bit about like, okay, moments where we definitely give in to like mom guilt. I feel like this is a very normal thing. For women especially, and I'm sure guys struggle with this too in fatherhood or in marriage. But what's advice that you would give to anybody who kind of just has moments of guilt in their life, especially in family life?
Yeah, I have 2 prayers that I pray regularly in this area, because if I let the mom guilt eat at me, which a lot of times it starts to really attack me when I'm traveling for a ministry event, where all of a sudden every single thing that I have ever failed at as a mom just comes just attacking me. And I know it's spiritual. A lot of it is spiritual, because it's trying to bring me down, and like the work you're doing is not important. And, you know, even though God has called you to do this, you're a bad person. You know, like those are the types of attacks, because you're not there with your kids. And that's something that, especially I think moms who have different projects or work or whatever, you feel guilty to take this thing on, because it is time that you could be spending with your kids, right?
Yeah.
So there's 2 prayers that I pray. One is, if I've lost my patience, I pray, and these are Father Robert Spitzer prayers. They're not something that I came up with on my own, but they're in his book, The Light Shines On Through the Darkness. And one is, Lord, please mitigate any damage that I've done with what I said or what I did or failed to do. So sometimes, you know, if I if I snapped at my daughter or was sarcastic with her or something, I'll just pray, Lord, please mitigate any damage that I've done to our relationship by my loss of temper or impatience. And then the second thing is I'll say, in the name of Jesus, I forgive myself. Because that's the thing, like, the Lord doesn't oppress us with thoughts of negativity and thoughts of guilt and shame. The Lord admonishes us in a way that helps us to be better and desire good, desire to love more, and desire mercy. And so when those dark thoughts come creeping in, Father Robert Spitzer calls it like the arrows of darkness, when we just replay these things in our head. The Lord wants us to be free from that. So in the name of Jesus, I forgive myself from this, and then let it go. Move on.
Yeah.
Because those thoughts are keeping us from prayer. They're keeping us from new relationship and being made new. So just in the name of Jesus, I forgive myself for this. In the name of Jesus, I forgive my child for whatever, and let it go. And then, I just, those are my two go-to prayers that I pray all the time.
That's really beautiful. I feel like that's the hardest thing. It's super easy for us to like give advice to somebody else, or even like if somebody else is struggling with something, it's very easy for us to come and be like, no, you're doing your best, and like give them praise and help them through it. But like we do the opposite for ourselves and like put ourselves down.
Yeah.
So that's really,
somebody
really beautiful.
Said to me, don't show less mercy for yourself than you would show for somebody else.
Yeah.
Like, if we live in that guilt, we're not living in freedom. And so even if we have screwed up, like, the Lord knew that we were going to screw up our kids. That He gave them to us anyway. So we're the perfect parents to parent these particular people in this moment in history. And what a beautiful thought that is. But then also what great surrender that requires of us. And humility to not be like, the future of my child completely and 100% depends upon my success as a parent.
Yep.
Like, that's an arrogance, really,
Absolutely. And like a lack of, giving up control.
Yes.
Yeah.
Exactly.
I feel like the same can kind of be said, and not necessarily mom guilt, but almost like personal guilt, especially postpartum. I will say this is one of the hardest, I think, stages in childhood. In our other episode with Crystal, like we talked about how newborn babies can sometimes be easy. Like you feed them, you put them down, you snuggle them. But I think mentally for the mom, they can be some of the hardest times. And I know I would never, ever place like pressure on another mom to, bounce back or like just be back to normal or whatever. And yet I do that to myself, like I look in the mirror and I'm like mean to myself and telling myself all these things. And I just felt, especially with this last one, I just felt like God was like, why can't you see yourself the way that I see you? And I think that's really like the challenge with mom guilt, with whatever, somebody's going through. It's like, no, God sees you in a particular way. And there's such beauty in that. So like allowing ourselves to really see ourselves through the light of like He who loves us,
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And I didn't know that I struggled with postpartum depression and anxiety until probably I had gotten down to my fourth kid. And then that's when I realized, maybe these things aren't normal. Maybe I don't have to live with this type, all the time. And so after each baby, I've gotten more proactive about that, and working with my doctor on treatments. But it's hard too because you're sleep deprived. Nobody can fix that. Your doctor can't be like, oh, here's a prescription for, to cure sleep deprivation. Like, no, you can't. And so, you're tired, and that contributes, and not taking rest, and then running, expecting to have your house cleaned. And that does cause me, a messy house and cluttered house causes me a lot of anxiety, just because I feel like the more clutter that I see, the more I just feel overwhelmed. It's just it's not, I have too. This, I don't expect to have a Joanna Gaines beautiful house, but I expect let's pitch in and let's help mom and do these
Yep.
types of things, and that's okay too. Like, it's not an either or. It's not a, well, if you want a clean house, you're just trying to bounce back too quick. It's, you need a clean house to help with your sanity. Then let's
Yep.
see, what do we have to do to help mom get
Yeah.
her sanity, you know? Like,
Yep.
and
Yep.
if dad has to take a day off and help mom, you know, then
Yeah.
that's what we
Yeah.
got to do.
Yeah, that's definitely the case for me too. I'm like, okay, if there's too much clutter, my brain feels cluttered and then my emotions feel cluttered. Like, I just need to relax
Yeah.
a little in a clean house.
Yeah. Well, and even like, the physical changes that your body takes. I remember contemplating suicide as a teenager, thinking, well, I'm so overweight and stuff. And, then I lost some weight. But then every baby that I have, I gain like 60 to 70 pounds. And so
Yep.
it's like, wow, if I don't get a hold over my self-worth and my value, regardless of all these body changes, then, I'm going to be in rough shape all around. So I do try to work out and to eat healthy just because I feel better when I do. But one of my ultimate motivational prayers is just, this is my body given for you. I just pray that this is my body given for you. Like, if it weren't for this body, if it weren't for the extra pounds that I have, and that weren't for, my fatigue and exhaustion, you wouldn't exist. Like,
Right.
you are
To the child, to your children.
yeah, just
Yeah.
that,
Yep.
just looking at them, like, this is my body given for you. It's the sacrifice of your body, your whole body, has
Yeah.
changed the world forever, because your child is here and would not have been here without that sacrifice.
Yeah. That's awesome. That kind of goes to one of the questions I had too, which was like, what is something within your journey as a mother that you're most proud of? Because that's one of them that, like, I am, is childbirth. That's one of the things that, like, I feel like is so hard during and after, where it's just like, I can't believe I did that, and it was for somebody to come into this world.
Yeah. Ooh, something that I'm most proud of. So
Yeah.
that's a hard one, because I've had to unpack a lot of just, I don't know, destructive things that I thought about motherhood, because I'm domestically challenged. I'm not a good cook. I don't
I'm
know
not
how to
either.
sew or throw themed birthday parties, and I deleted
Nope.
Pinterest because it caused me panic attacks. Like,
Right.
So
No, I don't care about all those things.
then I also work, and a lot of, Catholic and Christian devotionals on motherhood really involve around the mother being not working. And, and I've wrestled with that, and I'm feeling now in the season of my life that the Lord is asking me to be home more. I'm really praying that the Lord allows me to be home with my kids, that our family circumstances will. But that's the first time in my life that I've really, really, really known that's what God is asking me to pray for.
Yeah.
So, yeah, I think for me, the thing that I'm most proud of is I do try very, very hard to build quality time into our week with the kids, and with my husband. I really am intentional about not letting the week go by without doing something that's quality memory building, whether it's a board game or whether it's a trip to the pumpkin patch. It's something that I'm very intentional about.
That's awesome. Yeah, I feel like, I don't know, on the days where you're just like, all right, I got to get stuff done, like go sit in front of the TV. Those are really hard for me. I'm like, oh man, we just had a week of just watching the TV or watching Bluey or whatever. So yeah, I feel like those moments, even if it's just like, Mom, can we go to the park? And I'm like, yes, put your shoes on. Let's go to the park. Then it's like, that was good. That was good. Like, let them lead, but actually like say yes to going out with them, and making those memories.
Yeah. Yeah. And it can be just like, on our way back from church, we got an ice cream cone in the car. I mean, just something that's unintentional, something relating to, when, like, I just want my kids to grow up and think, yeah, I remember when Mom used to get us that ice cream cone at that certain place, or when we used to play
Yeah.
cards with mom, something
Yeah.
like that, where that's the thing that
Like it's a good memory for them.
yeah, because they're not going to remember my cooking and my meal. They're going to try to forget that,
Yeah. Yep.
and then they're hopefully not going to remember the times that I was like, well, we have to celebrate another birthday this month, like,
Right. I know. The beginning of the year is like January through April. We have like 6 or 7 things that we're supposed to celebrate. I'm like, not another cake. I can't. I
I
can't.
know, I know.
Yeah.
And the themes. I mean, some moms just knock it out of the park with the themes,
Good for
and
them. Yeah.
it's amazing. And I'm so jealous, but
Yeah.
that
Like
is
you
just
get
not
one
my
birthday
forte.
party every like 5 years.
Yeah, that's what we have. We have a schedule. There are certain birthdays where they do certain things. So
Yeah.
because yeah, that gets expensive.
Yes, for sure. Okay, so with we're talking about childhood and kind of like our goals as mothers, to really influence our kids, what was something that was like the greatest influence for you in your childhood, and like how has that kind of impacted or influenced, your goals as a mother?
Oh man, something influence in my childhood. I struggled a lot in our family life
Mm-hmm.
in general. There was a lot of things that were really hard about
Mm-hmm.
our childhood, from my mom's mental illness to her chronic illnesses to just a lot of challenges. So
Yeah.
I, but I will say, I really think that my siblings and I bonded when we were growing up. We were very close. Now different siblings have different issues with each other, but we were very close all through high school. And
Yeah.
that's something that I try to foster with my kids, is that sibling closeness, because there's 5 boys and 1 girl, and so sometimes my daughter gets left out of the things that all the boys want to do, or sometimes
Mm-hmm.
the oldest 2 get all the attention because they can go and do things that the younger ones are too young to do, or then the younger ones get attention because they're cute, like, and then the
Right,
middle
right.
ones get left out, and they're also cute, but in a different way. And so we try to like take a couple kids out with us if we're just running to the store, and
Mm-hmm.
and try to foster some of that sibling closeness, because that's something that I really valued growing up. And I would say I'm
Yeah.
still close with all of my siblings, but just there's different ones that are
Yeah.
closer or not closer than others.
Yeah. How many siblings do you have?
So I'm the oldest of 6, 5 girls,
Okay.
1
Yeah.
boy. Yeah.
Yeah. I feel like that's a benefit too of like big families. I come from one of 5, and it's the same thing. Just like all of the siblings very close. Yeah, that's very beautiful and a wonderful thing to foster in your own home.
Yeah. I want them to be
Yeah.
there for each other, and my husband's not particularly close to his only sibling, and so he
Mm.
misses that too. He wants our kids to be close.
Yeah. Oh, that's good. So how do you feel like you and David are similar in your parenting, and how do you feel like you're different, and like how can couples kind of overcome those differences?
Wow, that is, yeah, a very loaded question. If he was
Yes.
here, he would be like, "Oh, she's mean." No, David is stricter about things actually than I am. I'm more of a pushover. All the kids have to do is guilt me, and I just give in basically.
Yeah.
So it's hard for me, or I'll be like, David, don't be so firm with them,
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
yeah, so we try to support each other. There's times where we fail, where one of us will be like, well, you're kind of overreacting a little bit. We try not to say those things in front of the kids.
Yeah.
We really try to have each other's back so that they know they can't work us against each other. But even
Yep.
if we disagree with how the other person is handling a situation, we'll say, can I talk to you, because we need to talk about this, how you're handling this, and that can result in a big argument. I'm not saying
Right.
we figured out everything, where it's like, I mean, even just the other day, it was one of my kids was being really disrespectful to my husband, and my husband was kind of being sarcastic back, and then that kid was digging his heels in further, and I was like, and then my husband is being sarcastic back, and then I'm getting involved, and I'm like, you don't need to be sarcastic, and then I said it in front of the kid, and so then we ended up having a big argument. So it's just really, really trying, and this is we're just about to have a teenager, so we have a long way to go in terms of being able to say, like, yeah, parenthood, we mastered it, And
Can
each
we ever
child, different things work with different children. So I think it's, it's never going to be 100%, but really trying to support each other, like, listen to your mom, don't disrespect your dad, those kinds of things. And then if one person is angry and emotional about the situation, sometimes it's better for the other person to then relieve that person. Like, you can take a step away and let me handle this situation, And then that also helps diffuse the kid, because if my kid is really mad at me, then they can express that anger more safely to their father because they're not mad at him, and they can kind of talk it out a little bit better.
I relate to that one a lot, especially if you've been home all day with the child and, like, you're already overwhelmed. It's like, I need you to go handle this. Yeah, that's good. So I know I had asked you before we started if you were okay talking about this, because I didn't want to put you in a different situation. But so you guys have 6 kids that you've been blessed with, and then you also have little intercessors in heaven for you in your family that you have lost to miscarriage. And I think that is something that a lot of people don't talk about, but so many people have experienced that within their marriage. So I guess I'm curious, like, how did that affect you and David in your family life? And I guess what advice would you give to other people who have experienced this in their marriage?
Yeah, so we had never had a miscarriage before. We had our 6 kids, no issues. We found out we were pregnant. And then I was about to go on stage to play music for adoration. And that's when I started experiencing symptoms of miscarriage. And, David was like, do you want to go home? I said, well, what am I going to do at home? Let's just stay here and pray. And so I remember looking at the Eucharist, and I just said, Lord, everything that I have is yours. And I instantly heard the words back, everything I have is yours. And so it was this weird, transcendental, supernatural feeling that, like, I've got one foot in heaven and one foot on earth now. And that even though there's a physical separation, there's still a spiritual closeness. And that's been very powerful for me. Also, even in the grief, because we're coming up on the 1-year anniversary, and it was a long fight for this little one. It was 2 months before it was an official miscarriage. There's different things that trigger the grief. Like, I was in Hobby Lobby and I felt overcome by sadness and thinking, why am I so sad? This is crazy. And then I remembered it's because the last time that I had been in a Hobby Lobby with all the holiday stuff set up was when we were going through the miscarriage, and I was looking for something to commemorate, our loss. And it's amazing because your body as a woman remembers her children. Just does. You hear that from people who grieve their abortion or their miscarriage or, any child loss. Your body remembers your child. And so the thing that I've clung to the most will be the readings of the day. Every single day I was going through this process, I would be like, Lord, I need you to speak to me. And there would be something in the reading that just jumped out at me that was a word from the Lord to me. We always say, like, oh, I can't hear the voice of God, and then we never read scripture.
Right,
Like, there is always something. And in fact, when I had to go in for the D&C to make sure that everything had passed, the first line of the first reading that day was, "Rejoice, you who are not in labor. Our God is a God of compassion, and He is taking care of you." That was in that passage. Yeah. So, I mean, I don't know why this happened, and the kids struggled with it, especially Lucia, because she's been praying for a sister, and she's the only girl. She had a really
Yeah.
hard time with it at first, but my husband took the kids to church to pray for me and for the babies, and Lucia said to him, Dad, Jesus told me he's holding the baby. This is before we found out that there was no heartbeat. Jesus
Oh.
told us that he's holding the baby. And I think kids, while they can handle it very difficult and their level of understanding is very limited, I think they're also more more trusting sometimes that yeah, God has our babies and they're in heaven, and one day we're going to see them and there's going to be a welcome party, and just
Yeah.
also giving them physical things like we have a little statue and a little ornament, and then one of my friends drew a picture of Mary holding two babies. Having these physical reminders of our two physical family members who are not here with us,
Yeah.
to remember them is very helpful.
That's so beautiful. I started tearing up at what your daughter said. I think that's beautiful. What advice would you give to other people who have gone through something similar in their families?
I think that the best thing to do is not to look necessarily for why, because I think that will drive us crazy. Is like,
Yes.
why am I going through this? Why is this happening? Is instead to say, like, God, what are you showing me? What are you showing me today? I need to see you today. I need to hear your word today. That consolation, I think, helps when sometimes there isn't a why, that we'll know in this lifetime. So if you're going through something hard, whatever it is, it's just, God, I need you to show me that you're with me. I need to hear your voice. I need to hear a word. What are you doing here?
Yeah, that's so beautiful. Thank you for sharing that. I think I don't know, it's not something that I think is often talked about or shared until you see, something come up on Facebook that's like miscarriage awareness. And you're like, I didn't know that you had struggled with that. So I feel like that's something that, like, as a community, as a church, and just as a society, like, we should just lift each other up in that. And so I'm very grateful that you were willing to share that with everybody.
Yeah, thanks. Yeah, I am. I really also think that when it comes to it being a family event, and marriage,
Yeah.
I think it really is important to take time to pray together with each other for that circumstance, instead of just, well, I know he's praying and I'm praying, but to come together and pray as a family. Let's pray with mom. Let's support mom. I couldn't have gone through all of this without my husband just standing there and just praying for me, and with me when I didn't have the words to pray.
Yeah. And bringing your other babes into that situation so that they know that, they have somebody who they can pray to too in heaven.
Right, exactly.
Yeah. Oh, that's awesome. Okay, so if anyone would like to hear more from you, Noelle, or from David, or learn more about your ministry, where might they find you?
So my husband and I are starting a podcast, and it's called Somehow I Marriage. It's based
Nice.
on The Office. Michael Scott. We love The Office. Like,
I love The
Michael. Okay, good. So
The Somehow I Manage book.
Yes. I'm so glad you get it. Some people are like, "That's a weird name for a podcast about marriage." I'm like,
Somehow
it's
I
actually
Manage.
perfectly fitting. Like, we don't know how we do it. Somehow we married. Somebody thought it was Sometimes We Marriage, which I think is heretical. They said no. Somehow.
Is one of the episodes going to be always carry gum, a stick of gum?
Yes.
That's one of the chapters.
Yep. No, our first episode will be called I acquired my wife for $168 on
Nice.
on CatholicChicks.com. But yeah, so we're starting that, and that will be available wherever you get your podcasts soon. But we're just launching it, so it might take, I don't know when this is going to air, but it might be a minute. And then also Noelle Garcia Music. I'm on Instagram. And then it's mqministries.net is our website for speaking and music.
Awesome. And we'll link those in the show notes for you guys too.
Cool. Thanks.
Yeah. So I am very, very grateful that you were willing to come on here. I think you have just a lot of wisdom. You said 13 years of marriage.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
13 years.
Yeah. So I'm very grateful. BJ and I are only at 5, so we got a little ways to go. And I think it's always beneficial to kind of just hear other people's experience and learn from your wisdom. So I very much appreciate you coming on to Draw Near today. So
Thank you for having me. I appreciate it.